Wild, wonderful, and at war. The Quinag estate in the Highlands of Scotland is now at the centre of multiple battles between crofters and the conservation industry. Crofters who own a neighbouring estate are threatening to use Scotland's land reform laws forcibly to buy the estate from its owner, the John Muir Trust, which is one of the principal cheerleaders for Scottish land reform. Trouble started when Nature Scot granted a licence to the John Muir Trust for out-of-season night shooting on its land at Quinag. JMT says it wants to protect woodland by reducing the deer numbers. The Assynt Crofters Trust, or ACT, opposes the culls because it depends on the animals for its commercial deer stalking operation. Victor Clements is a crofter and woodland expert who advises a neighbouring estate and the ACT.
A lot of people put in a lot of work to try and make things work and resolve the issues, and we feel that's been undermined. Nature Scot, I think, have allowed it to be undermined. One of the crofters used a very colourful language last week. He described John Muir Trust as Nature Scot's mad dog. And they took the view that you can't blame the dog for chasing the sheep. You have to blame the person who allowed them to do that. To us, that is actually Nature Scot. They should not have allowed those authorizations.
What do they expect us to do when we see them shooting, in effect, our income? Of course we're going to object, but I don't think we were supposed to. If you reduce the stock, then as they are trying to do on Quinag to reduce the stock almost to zero, then the ground is not fenced off from their neighbours all around them, so the deer can move constantly from ground to ground to ground, and it causes this big problem of a reduction in the number of deer that are available.
Scottish Government body Nature Scot, formerly Scottish Natural Heritage, issued a statement. In it they said deer are an iconic species, but their numbers and lack of natural predators mean that they can have a negative impact on woodland and biodiversity. We issued the authorisation because we're satisfied that damage is occurring or likely to occur, and that no other reasonable means of control can be adopted to prevent damage. John Muir Trust says that slaughtering the deer is conservation work and protects the mountain.
The biodiversity is not in good shape. The habitats are they've deteriorated. They certainly haven't been improved. Even although we took that land over, we were sold that land specifically by the previous landowner because we were an environmental charity, and we just think it's unacceptable for us to be arguing for change at national level when we are not able to make that change in our own land. So the out-of-season licence is partly driven by the wider climate emergency and what needs to be done on land, but specifically on the state of our land in Quinag at the present time, which we don't think is good enough.
The Scottish Gamekeepers Association is also concerned about the cull.
Part of the SGA's aims is to represent our members and their jobs and their livelihoods, and that is the real concern here. If you have culls, out of season culls, which are going to take so many animals out of an area, and you do have that effect, which is the vacuum effect, and there'll be more deer, which potentially would have been on our members' ground, being pulled into that area and shot out of season, then it's undeniable that there's going to be an impact on neighbours. And the fact that John Muir Trust have decided that, and they're perfectly within the rights to do this, that they have decided that they're going to do this, but without recourse to those neighbours who rely on those deer, then that's not a good situation. It's not advisable, it's not good practice. In fact, an understanding had developed in Quinag over the years where they used a local stalker, John Muir Trust, and there was an understanding there, I think, that was developing with that local stalker, but he's no longer involved. They're bringing in contract staff from the east, and they seem to have just thought, we're going to overturn all the agreements that were there before and just crack on and do what we want to do without recourse to anyone else, and that is just not acceptable.
The conflict has escalated. The ACT has made a complaint both to Scotland's Environmental Standards Authority and the Scottish charity regulator about the granting of the licence. Crofters say they're considering the feasibility of joining in a community buyout of the mounting at Quinag from the John Muir Trust.
The Assynt Crofters Trust, they were the first group in Scotland to do this 30 years ago. They know how to do it. They've got history of doing it. They've got any amount of good legal advice. I believe they have public support in the Highlands. They're not an organisation that you want to fall out with. So I don't understand why anyone would pick a fight with them, really.
The Crofters becoming owners of the North Assynt estate in 1992 was a move that was pivotal to the land reform movement. The ACT points out that land reform legislation allows community bodies to apply to buy land, which is being used or managed in a way that results in or causes harm to the environmental well-being of a relevant community.
It is possibly a last resort option that if JMT would come back to the table, would discuss it properly with us, would show us what they're trying to do, and also indicate that they are willing to help themselves in this, which up until now they haven't been. If you look at their attitude to fencing, then maybe we could move forward on that.
We don't think that it's serious, the proposal. We don't. We think that we understand that there's frustration, and to argue for a community buyout, to suggest a community buyout, it kind of may put more pressure on us. But we will not respond to that pressure. One, because we think that, and we are absolutely confident actually, that if this was put before the community as a whole, then there would be resounding opposition to a community buyout.
An injured deer has also sparked arguments between the two sides. Crofters claim the animal was injured in the cull.
Our stalkers, plus the neighbouring neighbouring estate stalkers, have spent 2 days now trying to track down a deer that's been shot in the mouth, and they haven't managed to catch it yet. It's gone into one of the woodlands that are supposed to be in least favoured status, according to John Muir Trust, but they can't actually find it in the wood. It's so thick and difficult to walk in. So we not only are they slaughtering deer, but they are also not following up best practice on wounded deer.
That was nothing to do with the cull that we carried out on our property in Quinag. The cull was carried out. The culls that have been carried out by some of Scotland's most trained and experienced stalkers. They are absolutely meticulous and clinical in their approach. They understand animal welfare issues, and that we would not in any shape or form condone what has happened somewhere. There is no evidence it was on our property.
Both sides believe they know best for the mountain and its future.
We're once again being almost bullied by a government quango and a conservation body. And be quite honest and quite straightforward about this, we are not going to put up with it.
Clearly, traditional deer stalking estates have always been resistant to calling for conservation, certainly in our experience. We also have charitable objectives, and we have a right to manage that land to meet our charitable objectives. We won't be pushed around, but we would be more than happy to have a dialogue.
Unless the two trusts can agree and find common ground, they may not be neighbours for too long. A generation after the people who lived on the land at Assynt became the owners of their land, neighbouring Quinag could become another historic battleground for land reform in the Highlands.